Hey everyone, welcome to Phantom Files, where real mysteries come alive. Tonight we go back to 1872, the Atlantic Ocean. A British-American ship, the Dei Gratia, spots something drifting in the distance. A ghostly ship, off course, tattered sails, no signs of life. It's the Mary Celeste, a cargo ship that left New York just weeks ago. But now she's abandoned. No crew, no struggle, food still on the table, compass spinning. Footsteps at night, a journal left behind. The first line reads, "If you're reading this, then we never made it." Was it a curse, something supernatural, or a horror hidden beneath the waves? Get ready to dive into one of the greatest sea mysteries ever recorded. This is Phantom Files. December 4th, 1872. The Atlantic Ocean. A British-American ship named Dei Gratia sails calmly across the rough waters when something strange appears on the horizon. A lone brig, drifting aimlessly. Her sails, slightly torn but full, sway like a ghost on water. "Captain Morehouse," yells the first mate. "That ship, she's off course." Through the spyglass, Morehouse recognizes her instantly. Mary Celeste, a cargo ship that had left New York just weeks earlier. But something's wrong. She isn't responding to signals. There's no crew visible, just silence. The two ships pull closer. A small team rows across to inspect. What they find will become one of the greatest mysteries in maritime history. The Mary Celeste is empty. The sails are damaged, but the ship is perfectly seaworthy. The crew's personal belongings are untouched. 6 months of food and water stored. The cargo of raw alcohol barrels sealed. Even a meal is still set on the table, half eaten, as if the people aboard vanished mid-bite. No signs of struggle, no blood, no storm, no clue, and no one ever found again. What happened to the crew of Mary Celeste? Just as the boarding party turns back, one sailor notices something strange. A small leather-bound journal hidden under a bunk. He opens it. The first line reads, "If you're reading this, then we never made it." The leather-bound journal felt cold, too cold, as if it hadn't been touched in weeks, or maybe years. James Richardson, a sailor from the Dei Gratia, flipped open the brittle cover. The ink had faded in places, but the writing was sharp, urgent. November 24th, 1872. Something is wrong. The sea is silent, too silent. No birds, no waves. The crew is uneasy. Captain Morehouse reads over his shoulder. "Who wrote this?" he whispers. The signature at the bottom, Benjamin Briggs. "Captain, Mary Celeste." Morehouse shudders. Briggs was a seasoned sailor, a man of logic, not fear. The next page is more disturbing. "We've changed course, not by choice. The compass spins on its own. At night we hear footsteps above deck, but no one's there." Richardson scans the horizon. The ocean stretches in every direction, endless, calm, empty. "Last night Sarah said she saw a man standing on water, but when we ran out, nothing, only wet footprints on the deck." The journal pages shake in Richardson's hands. Not from the wind, from something else. Suddenly the wind shifts, the sails creak. A whisper, faint, carried by the breeze. "Go back." Morehouse snaps the journal shut. "Burn it," he says. "This ship is cursed." But Richardson hesitates. If this is real, then something took them, and it's still watching. The decision to tow the Mary Celeste back to Gibraltar had been made, but something in the air had changed. Heavier, darker. James Richardson, unable to shake the unease from the journal, was assigned to sleep aboard the ghost ship during the return voyage. Captain Morehouse didn't trust leaving it unmanned. Night fell. The ocean was quiet. Too quiet. Richardson lit a lantern and moved below deck. The hold was filled with sealed barrels of industrial alcohol, untouched, but there was a strange smell like old wood, mixed with wet ash. Then, a sound. Clink. He froze. Clink. Clink. Not a rat. Not the ship creaking. Something metallic. Deliberate. He moved toward the source. At the far end of the hold, beneath some stacked crates, he saw it. A chain, heavy and rusted, swaying slightly, but no breeze. He knelt and picked it up, and that's when he heard it. A whisper right behind his ear. "We never left." He spun around, lantern shaking, but nothing, just empty crates and barrels. Suddenly the lantern flickered and went out. Darkness, a breath not his own, in the pitch black. And then, footsteps. Slow, wet, echoing down the wooden hallway. Richardson didn't scream. He couldn't. His voice was gone. Richardson gripped the cold lantern in total darkness. The footsteps had stopped, but the silence was worse. He could hear only his own breath, short, panicked, and something else. A whisper right under the floorboards. "We are still here." He lit a match, hands trembling. The flame revealed nothing. The crates, the barrels, the damp floor. But the chain was gone. Back on the Dea Gratia, Captain Morehouse kept watch. Through the piping, the Mary Celeste looked almost spectral, a silhouette of sails and shadows. Suddenly, the bell on the Mary Celeste rang once. Clang. Then again. Clang. 3 times. Clang. 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 The signal for man overboard. "Richardson!" Morehouse shouted. He and 2 men rowed over immediately, weapons in hand. They boarded, called out. No response. Below deck, they found him, huddled in the corner of the hold, eyes wide, mumbling. "There's someone under the ship, tapping from below." He said my name. He knew my name. Morehouse stared at the journal still lying open on the floor. A new page had been flipped. Fresh ink, still wet. "Richardson is next." But no one had written it. Not anyone living. Richardson hadn't spoken since they brought him back from the hold. He just kept repeating one phrase, like a broken record. "It's under the ship." Watching, waiting. Captain Morehouse, though shaken, pressed forward. The Mary Celeste was too valuable to abandon. The salvage money would be enormous. But the crew was uneasy. Even the most seasoned sailors avoided eye contact with the drifting ghost ship. That night, Second Mate Briggs, no relation to the missing Captain Briggs, was sent to inspect the hull from the outside. He lowered himself into the small dinghy, lantern in hand, and circled the base of the Mary Celeste. It was calm, too calm. The sea reflected the moonlight like a mirror. Then, he saw it. A large black shape beneath the water, motionless, right under the ship. He leaned closer. The water rippled, ever so slightly. Suddenly, a hand, pale, swollen, bloated. It reached out from beneath the waves and grabbed the side of his boat. Briggs screamed. He dropped the lantern. The flame hissed out in the water. By the time the rescue team arrived, the dinghy was drifting. Empty. No sign of Briggs. Only wet handprints on the side of the boat, facing inward. The crew aboard the Dea Gratia was shaken. Briggs was gone, vanished into the ocean, like the Mary Celeste's original crew. Captain Morehouse ordered a full search of the ghost ship the next morning. He and 2 sailors boarded again. But as they stepped onto the Mary Celeste, a thick fog rolled in, unnaturally fast, and only around the ghost ship. The Dea Gratia, just a few meters away, became a shadow. On deck, ropes had been moved, coiled perfectly into spirals, like symbols, but no one had touched them. The cabin was worse. Morehouse entered the captain's quarters, where Benjamin Briggs's personal Bible lay open on the desk, a page torn out, folded neatly. He opened it. They walked into the deep, not drowned, not dead, just taken. Suddenly they heard it. Music. A piano. Slow, sorrowful, coming from below deck, but there was no piano aboard. Sailor Thompson, one of the men with Morehouse, walked toward the sound. The others followed. The melody echoed through the hallway, notes bending, warping, as if the keys were being played underwater. They reached the dining room, empty, no music, no piano, only one thing on the table, a dinner plate, freshly served, still steaming, and beside it, a chair, slowly pulling itself backward, as if someone had just stood up. Then, a whisper from all around them. "We're still hungry." The silence after the whisper was unbearable. Morehouse, Thompson, and the 3rd sailor, Elias, stood frozen in the dim candlelight of the dining area. The chair was still rocking. Thompson backed away, whispering, This isn't right. That food, it's hot. Who cooked it?" No one answered. Morehouse stepped forward, his eyes on the steaming plate. He reached for the silverware and saw it. A bite mark. Something had eaten from the plate, not recently, just seconds ago. Suddenly, clang. A second dinner plate slammed onto the table from above, though no one was there to drop it. Then, a third. 3 plates, 3 guests. Elias turned and ran, only to slam into a wall that wasn't there before. "What the hell?" he gasped. This was the hallway, but behind them the room was changing. The wood darkened. The candles flickered, and on the wall, in what looked like black mold or ink, letters began to form. "Sit, eat, join us." The smell in the air turned from cooked meat to rot. The food on the plates began to writhe. Worms, maggots, something else, moving. Morehouse grabbed both men and shouted, "Out now!" The trio burst onto the deck of the Mary Celeste, gasping for breath. The fog hadn't lifted. If anything, it had grown thicker, alive almost, wrapping around the ship like a cold shroud. Behind them, the sound of the piano waltz slowed, but didn't stop. Thompson turned toward the stairwell. "They're following us," he whispered. Morehouse looked back, and for a moment, through the thick mist, he saw them. 3 shadowy figures at the door were dressed in 19th century sailor uniforms, but their eyes were empty, hollow. One of them, the tallest, raised a hand and mimicked a bow, then extended his arm, an invitation to dance. Suddenly, Elias screamed. His feet were moving on their own. He spun once, twice. As if gripped by invisible hands, he was waltzing across the deck. "No, stop!" he yelled, trying to resist, but his body no longer obeyed. Thompson lunged to stop him, only to be pulled back by something unseen. Morehouse grabbed a rope and threw it toward Elias, yelling, "Hold on!" But Elias spun once more, then flipped overboard, like a dancer's final twirl, vanishing into the black water below. Silence, except for the piano, which now played just 2 notes, over and over again. Dum, 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 like a heartbeat. Thompson whispered, trembling, "We're not guests here. We're part of the performance." And Morehouse realized something chilling. There were 10 crew members who vanished from the Mary Celeste originally. Now, only 7 left on Dei Gratia. Captain Morehouse stood at the edge of the Mary Celeste's deck, staring into the black water where Elias had vanished. The ripples had already faded, as if the sea had swallowed not just a man, but all memory of him. No splash, no bubbles, just gone. Thompson slumped beside him, shaking, whispering prayers under his breath. "We need to leave this ship. Burn it. Sink it. Whatever this is, it's cursed." Morehouse didn't respond, because something was bothering him. There had been 10 souls aboard Mary Celeste originally. Briggs, his wife, their daughter, and 7 crew members. Now 3 from Dei Gratia had boarded. 1 gone, 2 left, and the ghost ship still felt incomplete, like it was waiting. Back on the Dei Gratia, the rest of the crew was tense. They watched the Mary Celeste through spyglasses, but the fog wouldn't let them see clearly. They heard the faint echo of piano notes and something new, children's laughter. Sailor Carter dropped his spyglass. "That was a kid on that ship. Did you hear that?" First Mate Arthur nodded slowly. Briggs had a daughter. She was on board, but how could a child's voice still echo? 150 years later, night fell fast, unnaturally fast, over the Dei Gratia. The fog had not lifted from the Mary Celeste, and now it began spilling onto their own ship, like smoke crawling across the sea. First Mate Arthur paced the deck, torch in hand, watching the shadows stretch where they shouldn't. Every sound, a creak, a whisper, a breath, felt too loud. Below deck, Sailor Carter couldn't sleep. He kept hearing footsteps outside his cabin, soft, deliberate. He finally opened the door with a start. No one, just darkness. But when he turned back inside, his mirror had fogged up, and on it, written by a finger, "You saw her too." Carter's hands trembled. He had seen something. A little girl, blonde, barefoot, watching from the corner of the deck the night before. She had smiled and then vanished. Up on the Mary Celeste, Morehouse and Thompson made their way to the cargo hold, hoping to find some clue. Instead, they found children's drawings, torn pieces of parchment nailed to the walls, crude sketches. One showed a man with hollow eyes falling into the sea. Another showed a ship covered in shadows, with the word "forever" scratched repeatedly beneath it. Then they found the third drawing. It was them. Morehouse, Thompson, Elias. All 3 drawn in eerie detail aboard the Mary Celeste, but the faces were melting. Before they could react, a loud bang echoed from above, the sound of an anchor chain unwinding. Thompson rushed up to the deck and froze. The Dei Gratia's anchor was now attached to the Mary Celeste, dragging it, pulling the living ship toward the dead one. And standing between the ships, Elias, soaking wet, eyes black. He raised his hand and pointed. 4 more to go. Thompson stumbled backwards, staring at Elias, or whatever was left of him. Soaked from head to toe, Elias stood on the connecting plank, now stretching between the Dei Gratia and the Mary Celeste. His face, pale as bone, twitched unnaturally. His lips parted, and seawater dripped out instead of words. Captain Morehouse stood beside Thompson, whispering, "That's not Elias. That's something wearing his skin." Suddenly, the Dei Gratia jolted, moved ever so slightly, dragged forward. The chains of the anchor creaked violently, as if unseen hands were tightening the pole. The fog swirled between the ships, now forming figures, silhouettes of sailors, some headless, some limping, all reaching out toward the living crew. Below deck, Sailor Carter screamed. He was trapped in his room. Scratching came from inside the walls. It was all around him, above, behind, even under the floorboards. Then a faint voice whispered, one by one, "Your ship will be ours." The lamp beside him flickered out. In complete darkness, Carter felt something cold and wet crawl onto his bed. Back on the Mary Celeste, Morehouse and Thompson made a desperate decision. They had to cut the anchor chain. Morehouse barked, "Run to the hold! Bring the axe!" But as Thompson turned to obey, the ship shifted again, violently. He lost his footing and slid across the deck, hitting his head on the railing. Captain Morehouse froze, as Elias, or the thing pretending to be him, dragged the noose made of human hair closer. The air between the Mary Celeste and Dei Gracia had grown heavy, thick, like syrup. Each breath felt like drowning. "Stay back!" Morehouse shouted, raising a broken plank like a weapon. Elias didn't speak, just smiled. The kind of smile you'd expect from someone who had forgotten how to be human. Then Elias spoke, without moving his lips. "The ship wants payment. You are in her debt." And the noose, it slithered like a serpent, moving on its own, wrapping itself around Thompson's unconscious body. Morehouse lunged forward, hacking at it, cutting it off. The hair recoiled, but hissed. Suddenly the entire ship groaned, wood bending unnaturally, as if the Mary Celeste was alive and angry. Above them the sails fluttered, even though there was no wind. The drawings in the cargo hold caught fire, one by one, burning silently, releasing screams that weren't human. Then, silence. But just before the scene faded, a new drawing appeared on the floor, drawn in ash. 5 men, 1 girl, no survivors. Back on the Dei Gracia, Sailor Carter finally broke the door and ran topside, breathless. He saw the Mary Celeste now touching their ship, not sailing, but growing into it, like roots of a dead tree invading living wood. The deck boards of the Dei Gracia began splintering, warping, darkening, becoming part of the Mary Celeste's cursed flesh. He screamed, "It's merging! It's becoming one ship!" Arthur, the first mate, grabbed his pistol, fired blindly into the fog. The bullet passed through Elias, but didn't exit. Elias laughed, then raised one hand, and the sea answered. A massive wave crashed between the ships, but instead of water, it was filled with hands. Rotting hands, grasping, pulling. One sailor, McBride, was caught by the ankles, yanked overboard. "Ihuaime," they heard him scream, all the way down. Then, the sea went still again. Just as Arthur turned, he noticed something horrifying. The ship's nameplate had changed. Both ships now bore the name Mary Celeste. The Dei Gracia was no more. The ghost had claimed her first victim. The fog had swallowed the horizon. No stars, no moon, just endless gray where like the sea had forgotten where the sky ended. Arthur gripped the rails of the now renamed Mary Celeste, eyes darting. Half the crew was missing. Some had jumped, some were taken. He couldn't tell which was worse. Inside the galley, Captain Morehouse dragged Thompson to safety. The young officer was still unconscious, lips moving in his sleep, whispering names they didn't recognize. "Miriam, Captain Briggs, Sarah, we're still on board." Morehouse froze. Briggs? That was the name of the original Mary Celeste's captain from 1872. But how the hell did Thompson know that? Suddenly, the stove in the galley lit itself. Flames roared, but cold blue flames, and in the reflection of the metal pots, Morehouse saw them. Faces, dozens, watching, some crying, some mouthing one word over and over, "Return." On the upper deck, Carter and Arthur worked desperately to release the lifeboat. "We need to get off this ship, now," Carter gasped. But when they pulled off the tarp, there was no boat beneath, just a gaping hole, and a black staircase descending into the hull. A staircase that hadn't been there before. From below, music floated up, a slow, haunting lullaby, played on an old piano. No one had a piano on board. Arthur, transfixed, stepped toward the stairs, but Carter yanked him back. "That's not for us!" Arthur turned, his eyes glassy. "She's calling me." Suddenly, a gust of wind blew through, and in the fog behind them, the girl appeared again, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a woman in black, veil covering her face, holding a burning oil lamp. The girl whispered, "You can't leave until the debt is paid." The ship creaked, and then groaned, and then laughed. Captain Morehouse didn't sleep, not because he couldn't, but because every time he closed his eyes, he heard the whispers again. "You brought them, babe." He sat in the captain's cabin, holding a lantern, watching the compass spin wildly, refusing to settle. No direction, no north, just chaos. Then he noticed it. The map on the wall had changed. Arthur and Carter stood frozen in the darkness. The staircase had vanished. The hull around them felt alive, breathing, groaning softly as if the ship had lungs that exhaled despair. The lantern flickered. Carter whispered, "Where are we?" Just then the walls ahead shifted. Wood groaned, and a door appeared. A white wooden door with rusted hinges, and a child's handprint smeared in what looked like blood. Arthur reached for the knob, cold as ice. He hesitated, but something behind the door was breathing. They pushed it open slowly and entered. The room inside was immaculate. A child's bed, dolls neatly arranged in a circle, a dusty rocking chair moving slowly, though there was no wind. In the center of the room, a small music box played a melody, the same lullaby that had haunted them for days. Carter moved to the bookshelf. Old, rotten books lined the shelves. He pulled one. It was a diary, faded ink, but the name on the first page chilled him. Sarah Elizabeth Briggs, age 7, Arthur gasped. "That's Captain Briggs' daughter," he read aloud from the diary. "Papa says the sea is angry again. Mama says we mustn't talk to her, the girl in the mirror, but she sings to me at night. And she says I can live forever if I never leave the ship." Suddenly the mirror on the far wall cracked, and from behind it a hand pressed against the glass. Small, pale, with broken fingernails. Then the mirror shattered, and the same ghost girl with hollow eyes and seaweed in her hair crawled out. But this time she spoke. "You've come back to finish the pact." Carter backed away. "What pact?" the girl whispered. "The Mary Celeste must never be alone." The dolls on the floor began to move, turning their heads toward Arthur and Carter. And then the door slammed shut behind them. They were locked in the cabin. The cabin was ice cold. Carter tried the door. It wouldn't budge. Arthur's breath came in sharp gasps as he stared at the girl's ghostly figure, floating an inch above the wooden floor. Her voice was faint, but terrifyingly clear. "I never left. I'm the pact. I'm the anchor." Arthur whispered, "What do you want?" The girl turned her head slowly, revealing a rope mark around her neck. "To be remembered." Suddenly the dolls all fell at once, as if pulled by invisible strings. The music box played faster, distorting the lullaby. The diary Arthur still held began to bleed ink, spilling over the pages, revealing words that weren't there before. She was sacrificed, not lost. A ritual, a secret, a mistake. Carter backed away. "This isn't just a haunting. This is a curse," the ghost girl pointed toward the bookshelf. "Behind." Arthur hesitated, then pushed aside the shelf, revealing a wooden hatch, sealed with nails, rope, and a rusty cross. "Open it," the girl whispered. As they pried it open with trembling hands, the air grew thick, like the room itself was trying to stop them. And then a scream, not from the girl, but from inside the hatch. Carter flashed the lantern inside. What they saw made them recoil in horror. A skeleton, dressed in a captain's uniform, eyes still wet, as if it had just died, and clenched in its fist, a scrap of paper with 6 names. Arthur read them aloud and froze. Morehouse, Carter, Arthur, Thompson, Sarah, you. Their names were already written. The last one was being written right now in dripping black ink, and the hand writing it wasn't human. Suddenly the ship creaked violently. A loud cracking noise echoed above. From the deck, someone was screaming. "Thompson!" The sound of feet running. A struggle. Then, silence. The lantern blew out. Darkness swallowed them whole. And the girl whispered one last thing. "Only one can leave." Arthur and Carter stood frozen in the dark, the echo of Thompson's scream still ringing in their ears. The hatch slammed shut on its own, lantern relit with a flicker. By itself, the ghost girl had vanished, and so had the cabin door. Without speaking, they both ran back the way they came. Only now the hallway was longer, twisted, warped, like a ship drowning in madness. Carter gritted his teeth. That scream. "We have to go up." When they finally reached the deck, wind lashed at their faces. The night sky above was pitch black. No stars, no moon. Only the sound of ropes swinging violently and a faint metallic creaking. And then they saw it, Thompson's hat, soaked in blood, lying near the mast, but no Thompson, just blood, smeared in long drag marks, leading toward the ship's edge. Arthur followed the trail until it ended near the starboard railing. There, a strange symbol was carved into the wood, ancient, not sailor's work, more like a ritual sign. Suddenly, the ship shook violently. Waves crashed higher than before. From the mist ahead, a faint chanting began, low, humming, like a dozen voices murmuring from underwater. And then Carter looked overboard. What he saw made his voice die in his throat. Arthur, the ocean, it's filled with them. Beneath the surface, barely visible, were faces. The man in the captain's coat stood still, eyes glassy, skin bluish gray, like something long dead and waterlogged. Arthur whispered, "Carter, that's not a man. That's..." Carter nodded slowly. "Captain Benjamin Briggs." The ghost captain moved forward, boots thudding heavily on the wooden deck. He spoke, voice distorted, like it was echoing from beneath the sea. "You read my name in the hatch, but you haven't read my truth." Lightning flashed. The ghost reached into his coat and pulled out a water-damaged logbook, its pages soaked, ink smeared. He opened it and showed them the first entry. "We left New York. A calm voyage. The crew was healthy. Spirits were high." But as he flipped pages, the entries grew darker. Crewman Thomas claims he saw a woman walk across the water. Child's laughter heard from the lower deck. No child aboard. One man jumped, said he heard his dead wife calling. Carter and Arthur looked at each other, the same events repeating again and before him. The captain closed the book. "I tried to save them. I sealed the hatch. I made the pact. But the sea always takes what it's owed." Suddenly his face twisted, his voice rose. "Now you must write the next law." The wind howled louder, ropes tightened, wood creaked violently. Behind them, the ship's wheel spun on its own, then stopped with a jolt, facing true north, and the ghost captain pointed in that direction. The island, the shrine, the final piece, return or be taken. As fast as he had appeared, he vanished into mist, leaving behind the captain's logbook, now dry and glowing faintly. Arthur picked it up. This book, it's recording on its own. A fresh entry was forming before their eyes. "They have seen me. They know the pact. The storm is coming. One won't survive." Carter's hands trembled. He said the island. But which island? As the sun refused to rise, the Mary Celeste drifted toward the black, jagged island, its peak hidden under a blanket of swirling mist. No compass worked, no birds flew, just the groaning of the ship and the gentle splash of water, like something was swimming just beneath the hull. Arthur gripped the captain's logbook, his eyes fixed on the landmass ahead. "Carter, this island, it's not marked anywhere. It shouldn't even exist." Carter stared through the spyglass. "There's something on the shore. Looks like a broken lighthouse or a temple." As the ship anchored itself, again without their command, they stepped onto the rotting rowboat, lantern flickering. The closer they got, the more unnatural the silence became. No waves, no wind, just a low hum like a chant, buried deep under their skin. When they reached the rocky shore, they saw it clearly. A collapsed tower with strange carvings, spirals, symbols, faces twisted in agony, etched into the stones. Carter touched one and winced. "It's warm, like skin." And then they heard it. Footsteps. Behind the ruined wall, someone moved. Arthur raised his lantern and saw a figure in a white dress, back turned, standing completely still. Long black hair, bare feet. She turned slowly. It was the same ghost girl from the ship. Only this time, she spoke. In a calm, clear voice, "You followed the call like they did." Arthur's mouth went dry. "Who are you?" "I am what they brought here, what they locked away, what the captain tried to drown." She walked toward the center of the ruin, her steps making no sound. She pointed at the ground. There, buried under moss and debris, was a stone door. Inscribed on it, "For those who seek truth, offer what cannot be taken back." Suddenly the wind returned, cold and sharp. The girl whispered, "Only one of you can leave this island alive." Carter turned pale. What does that mean? But the girl had vanished again, leaving them with a riddle, a door to something ancient, and a terrifying choice. Arthur and Carter stood frozen. The stone door at their feet pulsed faintly, almost like it had a heartbeat of its own. The inscription still glowed under the lantern light. "Offer what cannot be taken back." Arthur looked at Carter. "It wants a sacrifice." Carter's voice was quiet, wary. "But what kind?" Arthur removed his glove and reached toward the door. But as his fingers brushed the stone, a jolt of pain shot through his arm, and the stone began to shift, grinding, cracking, opening. The door slid open slowly, revealing a spiral staircase made of damp black stone descending into pure darkness. And from below came the sound of chanting, low, guttural, ancient. They descended step by step. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Breath visible, fingers numb. The walls were covered in strange symbols, etched in what looked like dried blood. Some of them glowed faintly, pulsing like veins. This place wasn't built by sailors, Arthur whispered. This is older, much older. At the bottom, they entered a chamber, circular, vast, and eerily silent. In the center stood a stone altar, and on it, a journal wrapped in decaying leather. Carter opened it. The handwriting was shaking, frantic. We shouldn't have taken her. The girl wasn't human. She spoke in our dreams. We tried to seal her here, but she never left. She became part of the ship, part of the ocean. Arthur felt his blood freeze. The girl, Talia, was cargo. Suddenly the chamber trembled, faint, like a pulse from deep within the earth. From behind them, a whisper crawled through the air. You found the truth, but truth is never free. They turned and saw the girl again, but this time her eyes were completely black. Her voice layered with hundreds of whispers. Only one can carry the truth back. Only one can warn the world. Carter stepped back. What are you saying? She smiled and pointed at the altar. Choose. The chamber began to shake violently. The exit behind them started to collapse. They had seconds. One had to stay. One could leave. The chamber trembled with an unnatural rumble, stones falling like teardrops from the ceiling. The girl in white stood by the altar, eyes black as void, her smile both innocent and monstrous. One of you must stay, she repeated. Only then shall the curse rest. Arthur and Carter exchanged a long, frozen glance. You go, Carter said quietly. You've got the mind to explain this to the world. I'm just a sailor. Arthur shook his head. No, this isn't fair. We both got here. Suddenly, the ground beneath them cracked, splitting toward the altar. The girl's voice echoed again, sharper, darker. Choose or be swallowed together. Flashback sounds. Arthur suddenly remembered that night on the Mary Celeste, when he first saw the girl in the mirror. And Carter had saved him from almost falling overboard. Carter had always protected him. Arthur's eyes welled up. He nodded, slowly, painfully. I'll go. Carter gripped his shoulder hard. You better write the hell out of this story, all right? Arthur climbed the stairs, while Carter turned back and walked toward the altar. As Arthur reached the surface, he looked back. The last thing he saw was Carter turning to face the girl, smiling, before the door slammed shut with a thundering echo. Silence. The island began to quake again. Arthur ran to the rowboat. The island was crumbling, the broken lighthouse collapsing into the sea, the temple walls sinking. As Arthur drifted back to the Mary Celeste, gasping, shaking, he was alone. Carter was gone, but the ship, once haunted, was now eerily still. No whispers, no shadows, just the sound of the ocean, calm for the first time. But Arthur knew the story is not over, because the truth lives with me now, and the world must hear it. He picked up the captain's log and began to write. Arthur sat alone in the cabin of the Mary Celeste. The ship was still, anchored in place, as if waiting for someone to give it purpose again. He held Carter's journal in his trembling hands. The silence was deafening, and yet, beneath that silence, Arthur felt something breathing. Not the wind, something else. Day 1, Arthur tried to steer the ship. The compass spun aimlessly. The sails refused to catch wind. And every time he turned a corner on the deck, he swore he saw a flicker of white fabric just for a second before it vanished. Day 2. At night, the dreams returned. This time, it wasn't the girl. It was Carter, standing on the altar, smiling. But behind him, the shadows twisted into monstrous shapes, whispering in languages Arthur couldn't understand. He woke up gasping, sweat dripped down his forehead, and there, on the mirror beside his bunk, were the same symbols from the island. Carved. Deep, he hadn't carved them. Day 3, Arthur finally spoke aloud. What do you want from me? No answer. Until the ship creaked, loud and slow, like it understood. He walked toward the storage hold, lantern in hand. The door was already open. Inside was the same leather-bound journal Carter had taken below, but Arthur had it in his own cabin. 2 journals? He opened the second one. The pages were blank, except the first page, written in dark, wet ink. You brought it back. Arthur dropped the book. The temperature dropped suddenly. Footsteps echoed above deck. But Arthur was alone, right? Arthur sat motionless, staring at the second journal, lying on the floor of the ship's hold. His breath was shallow, cold. He had locked the first journal in his cabin drawer. And yet, this identical copy now rested at his feet, with a message that someone or something had written. You brought it back. But who? Or what? He picked up the lantern and stepped into the lower deck corridor. The air was dense, thicker than before. Suddenly, a faint sound echoed. A whisper. Arthur. He froze. Carter? He called out, his voice barely above the whisper. Silence. Then footsteps. Not just one, several. But the ship was empty. Wasn't it? He followed the sound to the cargo room. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, there was darkness, blacker than black. Arthur hesitated, then stepped in. The door slammed shut behind him. He turned, heart pounding, and tried to open it. Locked. Suddenly, a voice spoke from the dark. You didn't leave me, Arthur. I never left you. A shadow stepped forward. Same height, same build as Carter. But the eyes weren't human. They glowed faintly red, and the face shifted like it was wearing Carter's skin, but struggling to keep it. Arthur backed away. You're not him. The voice laughed, a low, bone-chilling sound. I was Carter, until you walked away. The room began to tremble. Barrels toppled. Lanterns flickered. The curse didn't break, Arthur. It just followed the one who ran. Arthur dropped to his knees, eyes shut tight, whispering, It's not real. It's not real. When he opened them again, the room was empty. The door creaked open slowly. Arthur stumbled out, heart racing, mind spinning. Back in his cabin, he grabbed the two journals. They were now identical, even down to the ink smudges. No way to tell which was real, if either of them were. That night, he stared out at the ocean. Pitch black, dead silent, until the voice returned, right behind his ear. You should have stayed with me. Arthur hadn't slept in days. The whispers had grown louder, clearer, and now they came in his own voice. He could hear himself from the shadows, saying things he never remembered saying. Each time he opened Carter's journal, no matter which one, it had new entries, ones he never wrote. One entry read, We're almost there. Don't turn back now. Arthur slammed it shut. Almost where? He went above deck. The sea was unnaturally still, and ahead, rising from the fog, an island. No such island had appeared on any map he had seen. It was covered in dense forest, black sand beaches, and a tall stone structure in the center, something like an old temple or fortress. As the ship neared, Arthur tried steering away. The wheel wouldn't budge. It had a will of its own now. The Mary Celeste wanted to go there. As the anchor dropped on its own, Arthur whispered, Why this place? And the ship creaked in response, as if answering. Arthur stepped onto the island. The air was heavy, almost electric. He felt watched. Every leaf, every rock seemed out of place, too perfect, too silent. He took 10 steps in and found a grave marker, old, weathered, the name on it, Captain Benjamin Briggs. But Captain Briggs was never found. How could his grave be here for him? Arthur's hand trembled as he brushed off the moss. Below the name, carved in fresh scratches, one by one, they returned. He turned to run back, but the Mary Celeste was gone, vanished from the shoreline. Only thick fog remained. Arthur stood there, stranded, and from the trees behind him came the sound of something big moving, not one, multiple. The island wasn't uninhabited. It was waiting. Arthur stared at the disappearing silhouette of the Mary Celeste. Gone. Vanished into the thick fog like it was never there. His heart pounded, not because he was alone, but because he knew he wasn't. The dense forest felt alive. The trees leaned closer than before. He pushed through the thick foliage and saw the ruins. Ancient stones, crumbled walls, symbols he couldn't recognize carved into every surface. It wasn't man-made, or at least not made by modern men. There was a hallway leading underground, lit faintly by blue glowing moss. Arthur hesitated, then descended. The air grew colder, and then he heard it, a whisper. She never left. The voice echoed off the stone walls. He stepped further in and found a room, a large one. The walls were covered in scratches, nails, claws, symbols, and in the center, chained to the floor, was an old ship bell. It was labeled Mary Celeste, 1861. His breath caught. This was the ship's original bell. But how did it get here? He touched it. It rang, loud, echoing through the stone like a scream. And that's when the torches on the walls lit up on their own. A gust of cold air swept through, and something began to form in the shadows. A figure, a woman, drenched in seaweed, hair flowing like it was underwater, eyes milky white. And she spoke, not from her mouth, but from inside Arthur's mind. "They took me, but I never left the ship." Arthur staggered back. "Who are you?" But the figure only stepped closer. Each step, a splash, though there was no water on the ground. And then she whispered, "You brought her here, and now she wants you too." Arthur turned and ran out of the ruins. He didn't stop, not until he reached the beach again. The fog was clearing, and what he saw next, the Mary Celeste was back, exactly where it was. Sails still, anchor down, waiting, as if she never left. But now there was a light in the captain's cabin, and a silhouette standing behind the window, watching him, waiting. Arthur stood frozen. The Mary Celeste had returned, just as mysteriously as it had vanished. But the ship wasn't the same. Something about it felt off, as if it had sailed through time itself and returned tainted. The light in the captain's cabin flickered. The silhouette inside remained still, unmoving, almost expectant. Arthur took a shaky breath and stepped aboard. The wood groaned, but not like a ship. It sounded like breathing, alive. As he walked toward the cabin, the corridor seemed longer than before. Impossible. He'd crossed this path a dozen times, but now, the door to the right, one that never existed before, was wide open. Curiosity fought fear. He entered. Inside was a narrow staircase spiraling downward. But there was no lower deck. There never was. Yet, he descended. Each step echoed like he was stepping into a cathedral of silence. At the base, a dimly lit corridor stretched endlessly. Faded oil lamps hung on the walls, though no one had lit them. And then he saw it, a door at the end, or rather, a mirror pretending to be a door. Framed in black wood, ornate, and humming with a faint energy. Arthur stepped closer and looked into the glass. What he saw wasn't his reflection. It was the ship. But from above, like someone was watching it from the clouds, the deck was full of people. The missing crew, moving, laughing, alive. Suddenly, they all looked up, straight into the mirror, straight at Arthur, and they began to scream. Their faces twisted, melting into terror. They reached out. From inside the mirror, Arthur stumbled back, but the mirror had turned into a doorway now. Blackness leaked from the edges, and from within came a voice, the same voice he heard in the ruins. "You brought her back, now bring them too." He ran out, but the hallway was gone. The staircase was gone. He was now standing in the captain's quarters. How? The candle lit on the desk. A journal lay open, written in his own handwriting. "Tonight I go below. If I don't return, burn the mirror." He hadn't written this, at least not yet, and then he heard it. Footsteps. Above, on the main deck, but there was no one else on board. Was there? Arthur's heart pounded as he climbed the steps to the upper deck. The footsteps had stopped. The silence was deafening, as if the ship itself was holding its breath. The moment he stepped onto the deck, his entire body froze. Someone was lying there, face down, wearing his clothes, his face. No. This wasn't possible. Arthur staggered forward, dropped to his knees, and slowly turned the body over. It was him, eyes wide open, lifeless, skin pale, dead. But then, a whisper behind him, looking for something. Arthur turned around sharply, and there he was, himself, standing, alive, but it wasn't him. His smile was too wide. His eyes were empty, and his voice not human. What are you, Cheyenne?" Arthur gasped. The doppelganger tilted its head. "I'm what you left behind. I'm what the mirror kept." Before Arthur could move, the doppelganger stepped forward and whispered, "We are not trapped here. You brought me here." The moment he spoke those words, the sky above turned gray. Thunder without clouds. The sails flapped wildly, though there was no wind. And then, the crew appeared, not in flesh, ghostly silhouettes, transparent, floating, their eyes hollow, their mouths whispering the same word again and again. "Return, return, return." The doppelganger walked toward them, and they made way, as if he belonged. Arthur backed away slowly, his foot hitting the corpse, his own body. Suddenly, the ghostly crew turned their gaze on him. All at once, and in unison, they whispered, "Choose." Arthur didn't understand. Choose what? The doppelganger turned one last time. "You can leave. But only one of us walks away. He pointed at the corpse, then at himself, then at Arthur. 3 versions, 1 soul, 1 truth, and then he vanished. Just like that, gone. Arthur looked down at his own body, and for a second it blinked. Arthur staggered to his feet, breath shallow, eyes darting to every corner of the ghostly deck. The second Arthur had disappeared, but something inside him had changed. Something deep, as if a piece of himself had been left behind, or maybe taken. He found himself back in the captain's cabin, drawn, almost magnetically, to the large oak chest near the writing desk. It had been locked before, but now it was open, almost inviting. Inside lay a single object, a brass compass. But it didn't point north. The needle twitched wildly, then settled on a direction, down. Arthur slowly lifted the compass. The moment he touched it, the ship groaned. Yes, groaned. Wood creaked like a dying animal. Ropes shivered, and a deep vibration passed through the floorboards. Arthur turned, and there on the desk was a journal. Not the captain's, his own handwriting, but he had never written it. The pages were filled with strange symbols, spirals, mirror alphabets, and diagrams of a ship beneath the sea. A second Mary Celeste? Suddenly the compass needle began spinning rapidly, then stopped, pointing toward the lowest deck of the ship, the hull. Arthur clutched the compass and followed its pull, heart pounding with every step into the ship's belly. As he descended deeper, the lights dimmed. The walls seemed to close in, almost breathing. And then he found it. A sealed iron door, one that wasn't on the original plans. Carved into it were markings from the journal, and in the center, a handprint. Arthur hesitated. The compass vibrated in his hand. He placed his palm on the door. Click. The door unlocked. Inside was another ship. Yes, an upside-down replica of the Mary Celeste, suspended in black water, floating. In the darkness, ghostly figures moved inside its hull, and at the helm was Arthur. Not him, not the doppelganger. Another one, wearing old naval uniform, whispering to himself, chanting, "To return is to forget is to live. One must stay, so the other can breathe." Arthur stepped back, trembling. He looked at the compass. The needle now pointed backward, back to where he came from, back to the choice. But was it too late? Behind him, he heard the door lock again. Arthur stood frozen in front of the upside-down replica of the Mary Celeste, still hanging eerily in the black abyss. His own reflection, another version of himself, commanded the ghost ship beneath. He screamed, but no sound came out. The compass had stopped working. No twitch, no spin, just stillness. Arthur turned back, trying the iron door again. Locked. No handle, no mechanism, nothing. The cold crept in. But this wasn't the cold of wind or sea. It was the cold of forgotten time. A whisper echoed through the chamber, faint, repeating, "The log must be rewritten, or the cycle continues." Arthur turned. On the wall behind him, new words were burning through the iron, appearing one by one in glowing ember. "Find the memory that doesn't belong." He stumbled back up the narrow steps, but something had changed. The Mary Celeste above was different. The furniture in the captain's cabin was rearranged. Names in the logbook had altered. Now, the first officer's name was listed as Arthur Sinclair, his name, but he was never part of the original crew. Or was he? Arthur's head throbbed. Flashes hit his mind. Him standing on the dock in New York, but in 1872. Him shaking hands with the captain. Him waving goodbye to a woman with red hair. A child calling him Papa. He fell to his knees. "No, that can't be me," he whispered. "I wasn't there. I wasn't even born." And then another voice, clear inside his head, "But your soul was." Suddenly from the hallway, a shadow moved. Not a crewman, not a ghost. It was the child. Small feet, soaked dress, pale skin, and no eyes. She whispered, "Papa, you left us. We stayed. Now stay with us." And then darkness. Arthur awoke on the floor of the ship's galley, the brass compass clenched in his hand once again. Only now, the compass had no needle, just a mirror. And in that mirror, he wasn't alone. Arthur's hands trembled as he followed the echo of those soft, wet footsteps. The child with no eyes had vanished into the dark belly of the ship, toward the cargo hold. The ship moaned with every step, as if it remembered the last time someone tried to go down there. As Arthur descended the creaky stairs, he noticed a strange humidity, like the sea had started leaking into time itself. The compass mirror in his pocket had begun to fog. At the bottom, a single lantern flickered. And there it was, a massive wooden crate, chained and sealed, bearing the mark, property of C.H. Briggs, New York, 1872. But that's not what shocked Arthur. What shocked him was the faint thumping sound from inside the crate, like something alive breathing. He found a rusted crowbar nearby. His heart thudded faster than the sound within. This crate sailed on the Mary Celeste. It never reached Genoa. The memory wasn't his, but he could feel it, like it was passed down through the blood of the ship. Arthur jammed the crowbar under the edge. One pull, wood cracked. Another pull, the chain slipped free. Thump, 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 then silence. He opened the lid. Inside lay an ancient object, a mirror, carved into an oval frame with inscriptions in Latin. And inside the mirror, his reflection wasn't his own. It was the captain's face, mouth moving, whispering, but no sound. Arthur leaned closer, and then the whisper burst into his mind. You freed it. The crate slammed shut on its own, the lantern extinguished, and something slithered into the darkness behind him. Arthur turned. Nothing. But the air had changed. It wasn't air anymore. It was breath. Arthur gripped the edges of the open crate, staring into the ancient mirror. His face was no longer his. It shifted between his own and the captain of the Mary Celeste, each flicker showing anguish, dread, and secrets not meant to surface. And then, the whisper returned, louder now, inside his skull. You brought the ship back. Now bring back the truth. He looked closer, and within the mirror the ship appeared. Mary Celeste, floating alone on calm waters, its sails still. Then, one by one, the crew appeared, but not as they were. They were pale, motionless, staring directly at him. Some had rope burns on their necks. Others had no faces. And behind them stood a woman, dressed in black, holding a lantern. She whispered one word. Return. The reflection shattered, but not the glass. The room shattered. Wood split. Chains rattled from the walls. The ship trembled as if it had been wakened. And suddenly, he was no longer in the cargo hold. He stood on the deck of the Mary Celeste again. But the sky was bleeding red. Waves were frozen. Time stood still. And standing at the helm was the woman from the mirror. She walked toward him, her eyes black as coal. Her voice was layered like 1,000 lost sailors speaking together. You are the witness. You are the bloodline. You are the debt. Arthur stumbled back. What debt? The woman's hand reached out and touched his chest, and instantly his mind flashed to a memory not his own. A ritual. The original crew. A contract. A hidden room beneath the galley. And a deal made to keep the ship forever safe at the cost of souls. They broke the deal, the voice said. Now it must be repaid. Arthur gasped for air. His shirt was wet. Not with sweat, but with salt water. The ship was sinking, but only for him. Everyone else was still standing, watching, silent, dead. Arthur stumbled across the shifting deck, gasping for air. The voices had stopped. The crew's ghostly stares vanished, the woman in black gone. Only one thing remained clear in his spinning mind, the hidden chamber beneath the galley, the place where the deal was sealed. He rushed to the galley. Everything looked normal. Dusty pots, rusted cutlery, hanging lanterns. But the floor, there was a faint carving under the wooden planks, a circle with ancient Latin symbols. He bent down, wiped the grime away, and there it was, a hidden hatch. With great effort, Arthur pried it open. A cold, damp air escaped, air untouched for over a century. Inside was a narrow staircase leading into pure blackness. He lit a lantern and stepped in. The walls were lined with old bones. Small carved figurines hung from the ceiling. Some looked human, others inhuman. And in the center of the room, atop a stone altar, sat an ancient book, bound in leather that looked unsettlingly organic. The cover bore a title, Contractum Tenebris, the Contract of Shadows. Arthur opened the book. Bloodstains marked the pages, drawings of the original crew, symbols of the Dark Pact, and at the very end, a list of names, each with a date and a black cross. And the last name, Arthur M. Briggs, 2025. His hand shook. He dropped the book. Suddenly the lantern flickered. A voice echoed from the walls. Blood must pay what blood has owed. He turned. From the dark corners of the chamber, they emerged. Shadowy figures, one by one, former crew members. Their faces pale, hollow, eyes wide with unfinished stories. They were trapped, and now Arthur was next. Arthur clutched his chest, his breath shallow. The shadows surrounded him, murmuring, reaching, crying. And then, from the far end of the chamber, a soft blue glow emerged. A spectral figure stepped forward. A tall man in a soaked navy coat, gold buttons tarnished by time. His eyes glowed with sorrow. "Arthur, you've come far," the ghost said in a low, deep voice. "But are you ready for what comes next?" Arthur gasped. "You're Captain Briggs," the spirit nodded silently. And then, the truth began to unfold. The Mary Celeste wasn't just a trade ship. It was cursed. During its maiden voyage, Briggs had unknowingly accepted a safe passage blessing from an occult sect in Lisbon. In return, they demanded a soul. Every 100 years. The first sacrifice? One of his own men. Briggs refused, and thus began the curse. Crew members disappearing, time bending, hallucinations creeping into the minds of sailors. To protect his family, Briggs had taken the ship into the deepest part of the Atlantic. "We sealed ourselves below deck, hoping the sea would swallow the evil, but it didn't," he said, his voice trembling. "It waited until you." Arthur stepped back. The book, the names, the shadows. Everything was coming together. "If I'm the last on the list, then how do I break it?" he asked. Captain Briggs' ghost pointed to a rusted dagger embedded in the altar. "With this, one final sacrifice must be made. Either your blood or the truth." Arthur hesitated. Was he ready to trade his life to free the ship and its lost souls? Or could he find another way? Suddenly, the chamber began to tremble. Time was running out. Arthur stared at the dagger. Rust had almost eaten through the blade, but its purpose was still intact. The book lay open beside it. The Latin text pulsed like it was alive. Flipping through the last few pages, Arthur found what the captain hadn't shown him yet. Ritual of reversal. Lux ex tenebris. Light from darkness. A way to undo the contract. But the price? The soul of one, bound by love. The betrayal must be personal. Arthur froze. The ship wanted more than a body. It wanted a bond to be broken. A connection. A promise shattered. And that's when her name flashed in his mind. Clara. His fiancée back on land. The one he had left behind to chase the truth. The only one he had ever truly loved. "Why her?" Arthur whispered. Captain Briggs' ghost reappeared, his eyes hollow. "Because love is the purest form of power, and breaking it feeds the curse." Arthur's hands trembled as he closed the book. Could he really give up the one thing that kept him sane? Or could he trick the ship? He had read about false rituals, illusions of sacrifice. Could he bend the curse without truly betraying Clara? But the ship, it watches. It knows. Suddenly a voice echoed through the chamber. Not human, a dark, ancient voice. "Choose now, love or freedom. You can't have both." The floor rumbled. The dagger lifted itself from the altar. Hovered, waiting. Arthur clenched his jaw. There must be another way. And then he made a decision. But what he chose, you'll find out in the next episode. Arthur stood near the altar. The dagger floated before him, suspended midair by a force unseen. He had just whispered Clara's name. And suddenly, the air shifted behind him, the sound of footsteps. Not echoes, not illusions. Real, soft, slow, measured. He turned and froze. "Arthur!" It was Clara. Her white dress fluttered like mist, her eyes full of worry and love. "How did you get here?" Arthur whispered. She stepped forward. "You wrote me about the ship, about the voices. I had to come." "That's impossible," Arthur said, backing away. "You were in Boston. No one knows where this ship is." "No one." Clara looked confused. "I followed the map. It was in your journal." Arthur's heart sank. He never told anyone about the map, not even in letters. Then who or what was this? He reached for Clara's hand, cold, not cold like fear, cold like death. "Who are you?" he asked. Clara smiled gently, her eyes glassy. "You left me, Arthur, and promises don't like being broken." Suddenly, her voice shifted, distorted, doubled. Behind her smile, something else was watching. Arthur stumbled back as shadows surged around Clara. "Make the sacrifice," the voice hissed through her lips. "Seal the ritual. Give her up." But Arthur wasn't ready. Not yet. He slammed the book shut. The dagger dropped. The chamber shook violently, the ship's rage echoing through every plank. Ghostly figures screamed from the walls. The candles blew out. Arthur clutched the book to his chest, gasping. If that wasn't Clara, then where was the real one? And how much time was left before the ship made the choice for him? Arthur wandered the lower deck, trembling. Clara's face, or what wore her face, haunted his mind. He had to know the truth. He had to find her. But as he passed the old cargo bay, a faint metallic clink caught his attention. He turned. An old chest, half buried behind crates, was slightly open, not listed in the ship's inventory. Inside, wrapped in weathered cloth, a journal. Not the captain's, not the first mate's, belonging to Benjamin Briggs, the real captain. The pages were stiff, but readable, and as Arthur flipped through it, the words chilled his spine. If we perform the ritual on the 13th night, the ship's debt will be paid. The sea will take what it is owed, and in return, she'll sail safely, forever. But if we fail, the page was torn, deliberately. Arthur read further. Another entry, scribbled in panic. We made a mistake. The symbols were wrong. Sarah tried to stop it, but she... Another page, burned through. But beneath the ruin, faint ink bled through the other side. He held it to the lantern. A map, not of land, but of compartments beneath the ship. Ones not on any record. Hidden chambers, ritual circles, secret doors. Arthur now had two choices. Follow the map and try to reverse the ritual, or complete it and offer someone. He tucked the journal in his coat. Suddenly, a whisper, not from outside, inside his head. She's waiting for you, below. Arthur held the lantern close as he stepped into the forbidden hatch, hidden just behind the aft cargo hold. The air was thicker, damp, and oddly warm. Each step echoed like he was walking into the lungs of a beast. The map had shown this passage, but it hadn't warned about the symbols carved on the walls. Ancient, pulsating faintly, as if breathing. He reached a sealed wooden door with no handle. But when he touched it, it opened on its own. Inside was a circular room, walls lined with dark stones, and in the center, a ritual circle, marked with dried blood, bones, and an unlit lantern. But what froze him, a mirror, placed vertically against the wall. No reflection, just darkness. And then a faint whisper. You came too late. Arthur turned. No one. Again. She waits, where the sea doesn't move, where time stands still. He stepped closer to the mirror. And then, his reflection appeared. But it wasn't him. It was Captain Briggs. Pale, hollow-eyed, smiling. Suddenly, Briggs' reflection raised a finger, pointing behind Arthur. He turned around. Clara, but her face was flickering, like a broken projection. You were warned, she whispered. Suddenly the mirror cracked. From inside it, black water began leaking. The room began to shake. Arthur backed away as the whisper became a scream. You cannot undo what's been done. He grabbed the lantern and fled back up the passage. The walls closing in, voices clawing at his mind, and the mirror's shards shattering behind him like chasing knives. Arthur hadn't slept. The whispers from the hidden chamber still rang in his ears. He had seen Captain Briggs, but not alive, not dead either. But someone else had seen him last. Sarah Briggs, his widow. Arthur arrived at her secluded coastal cottage just before dusk. The skies were turning violet, and waves crashed harder than usual. She opened the door, her face pale, eyes hollow, as if she'd been waiting. You shouldn't have come, Arthur. He stepped inside anyway. The air in the house smelled of salt, and something burned. Books, scrolls, old seafarer maps, scattered on a mantle. The captain's pocket watch, still ticking. Sarah, I saw him, in the ship, in a mirror beneath the deck. Her hands trembled. Then she walked to a locked drawer, opened it, and pulled out a journal, the captain's. But when Arthur tried to take it, she snatched it back. Do you know why the crew vanished? She whispered. They didn't vanish. They were taken. Arthur's breath caught. By what? She looked into his eyes. And for the first time, he noticed her pupils weren't quite human. She whispered. By the oath they broke. The one he made for immortality. Arthur froze. What oath? She placed the journal in his hands and said, read the entry dated November 4th, 1872. But once you read it, Arthur, you can't unknow it. As thunder rolled outside, Arthur opened the journal. The entry read, tonight we anchor near the Azores. The sea is still. I have made the pact. She has agreed. In exchange, one must remain behind to keep the passage open. Suddenly the candles flickered. Sarah's voice changed, deeper, unfamiliar. "You've opened the gate again, Arthur. She knows you now." He looked up. Sarah was levitating above the ground, hair floating, eyes glowing blue. Arthur ran, but not before snatching the journal. He stumbled into the rain, the sea in front of him roaring like a wild beast. And from the waves, he saw a shadow rise, a figure in a captain's coat, waiting, watching. Arthur didn't stop running until the Mary Celeste came back into view, docked where he last saw her, though no one had towed her back. She was waiting, like she never left. The journal in his coat pocket felt heavier than stone, its words still burning in his mind. One must remain behind to keep the passage open. Arthur stepped aboard. Silence. No seagulls, no wind, only the ship breathing, its ancient wooden frame groaning under secrets. He moved toward the captain's quarters, door unlocked. Inside, undisturbed, almost too perfect. The maps were still on the table, the compass still spinning, and on the wall, a mirror. But this time, the mirror showed something else. Himself, yes, but not alone. Behind him, barely visible, the shadow of the captain. Arthur turned around, empty. He stepped forward. The floorboard beneath him creaked, and then sank. He fell, hard, down into a hidden lower deck he didn't know existed. Dim lanterns lit themselves. No flame, just a cold glow. The walls were lined with names, etched with blood-red ink, crew names, and his own name, freshly written. He backed away. Then, whispers, voices speaking backward. But one clear word echoed, payment. He turned. A figure stood at the far end of the corridor. Not quite human, not quite shadow. A woman in seaweed-draped robes, glowing faint blue. Us. Endless black. "You read the journal," she said. "That makes you the key." Arthur asked, "Key to what?" She smiled, slow and eerie. "To the world between, to the place where time stopped on the ship. You must decide, free them all or take his place." Arthur's voice cracked. "Whose place?" The woman's face shifted, became Captain Briggs, then Sarah, then his own face. She whispered, "The one who remains is the one who never returns." Arthur stared at the logbook. It sat on the captain's desk, heavy, old, but pristine. Its pages flipped open on their own. He leaned in. The entries were all written in the same handwriting, his handwriting. Dates from 1873, 1890, 1922. How? He wasn't even born then. June 4th, 1873. I heard them again. The voices below. The sea is alive under the deck. July 9th, 1890. They said I must choose. Every time I say no, she shows me another face. My mother, Sarah, me. Arthur trembled. This wasn't just deja vu. This was something deeper. Was he trapped in a time loop? A reincarnation? Or had the ship absorbed his soul long ago, and he was only now remembering? Suddenly, a cold gust slammed the door shut. The lights flickered, and then the whispers returned. This time, not distant. Inside his head, they spoke in unison. "Write your next entry." He grabbed the pen, unwillingly. His hand moved, not by his will. Words flowed. October 13th, 2025. I think I've always been on this ship. Every time I try to leave, I come back. Maybe I was the crew all along. Maybe we never left. His hands stopped. He dropped the pen, panting. And then the mirror cracked. A figure stepped out. It was him, but older, scarred, eyes hollow. His doppelganger spoke. "You think this is your first time here? You've written this story 38 times before." Arthur backed away. "You're the keeper, Arthur. The ship, she chose you." The ship groaned loudly, like it was alive, reacting. The wall shifted again. A door appeared, glowing faintly. His other self said, "Walk through it or stay. But know this, one path leads to freedom, the other to your past lives, all waiting." Arthur reached for the handle, but just before he could open it, he heard a woman's voice. "Sarah." "Arthur, don't go in there. That's where it all began." Arthur's eyes fluttered open. He was soaked, the scent of salt and old wood thick in the air. He wasn't on a cloud anymore. He was back on the Mary Celeste, but it wasn't abandoned. Men shouted commands. The sails flapped in the wind, and waves slapped against the hull. But when he looked down, his hands weren't his own. They were rough, calloused, his clothes torn, soaked sailor's garb from the 1800s. He staggered to a mirror. A different face stared back at him. "James Parker," Someone called from behind. That name echoed in his head. Not Arthur. Now, he was someone else. A sailor, a real crew member of the original Mary Celeste. Suddenly, flashes hit his brain. Memories that weren't his. A storm, a ritual, a locket crate, blood on the deck, and the sound of chanting. Arthur, or rather James, stumbled to the lower deck, a secret compartment beneath the captain's quarters. His hands moved on their own, unlocking something. Inside was a journal, sealed with a strange symbol. The pages crackled as he opened it. One word repeated over and over. Aetheris, he whispered it aloud. And then the ship lurched violently. A scream echoed above. Arthur rushed up. A crew member stood frozen, pointing at the sky. Everyone looked up. A second Mary Celeste, faint, ghost-like, hovered just above the real one. One sailor dropped to his knees, crying, "They've come! The ones who watch!" The ship was surrounded by fog, but this fog was whispering. And suddenly, people began to vanish. One by one, no struggle, no sound, just gone. Arthur felt a pull at his chest, the same pull he'd felt in the sky realm. But this time, he wasn't being offered a choice. He was being tested. Would he vanish too? He ran to the captain. "We have to stop the ritual. We have to lock the book away." But the captain's eyes were glowing. He wasn't himself anymore. He whispered, "You open the door, James. Now you must walk through it." Arthur, now James, turned. Behind him stood Sarah. But she was from this timeline too. And she whispered, "Only if you remember who you are, can you save us all." Arthur, or James, clutched the ancient journal in his trembling hands. The pages flipped on their own, whispering secrets in a language older than Latin. Symbols glowed faintly, pulsing with unnatural energy. Aetheris, the path between worlds. This wasn't just a voyage gone wrong. This ship had been sacrificed, used as a conduit between realms. And the crew, they weren't missing. They were trapped, suspended in an endless loop between dimensions. A creak from behind. Sarah stepped into the lantern light, but her eyes were filled with tears. "I remember now. I wasn't just a passenger. I was the key." In the journal, Arthur found a ritual diagram, shaped like the Mary Celeste itself. 12 circles, 12 names. Each circle had a purpose, a sacrifice, a seal, and one of the names was Arthur Morgan, his real name, his original identity. Somehow his soul had existed in multiple times, called back again and again to the Mary Celeste to complete or break the ritual. Below deck, the chanting began. The possessed captain and the last remaining the crew formed a circle, voices rising with each word. Veniam transire, ad aetheris ego dabo. The journal warned, once the 12th soul speaks, the veil will rip forever. Sarah grabbed Arthur's hand. "You must choose. Complete the ritual and set them free, or destroy the book and trap the darkness forever with us." Arthur hesitated. The walls groaned. The air turned electric. A storm surged outside, lightning clawing at the sky. His heart pounded. Then he stepped into the circle. He raised the journal. Every eye turned to him. His voice echoed, louder than the others. "By the power of the Aetheris, I offer the 12th name, mine." A gust of wind slammed through the room. The circle lit up in blinding white. The ship shook violently, as if caught between worlds. Screams filled the air, not of pain, but release. Arthur closed his eyes. Let them be free. Silence. The chanting stopped. The wind died. He opened his eyes. The ship was empty. Just him and the journal, slowly turning to ash in his hands. Sarah was gone. The crew was gone, but something told him they were finally at peace. What you just heard was only a glimpse into the darkness that surrounds the Mary Celeste. Questions still hang heavy in the air, unanswered, unexplained, and untouched by time. But this is far from over, because the sea doesn't forget, and neither do the spirits. It swallows. So stay with us as we dive deeper into the secrets of this ghost ship. More clues will emerge, more shadows will rise, and maybe, just maybe, the truth will finally come to light. Until then, don't forget to lock your doors and never ignore the silence, because sometimes it's screaming louder than words.